Hey, this is TimmyG. Welcome to the 19th edition of my tutorial series on DJay Pro 2 for Mac by Algoriddim. Today's tutorial will show you how to transition with different BPMs using sync in DJay Pro 2. Even though this is a tutorial series on DJay Pro 2, this tutorial is applicable to any DJ software using any DJ controller. Let's get started. So the basic idea of this transition is to match the tempo of the incoming track with the track that's currently playing. And as we're fading in the incoming track, we bring that track back to its original tempo. The way to keep both tracks at the same BPM while the tempo is changing is by using sync. Here are some examples of this technique that I've done in some of my DDJ 1000 mini mixes. Before our first example, I want to explain exactly what sync does. It will sync up the grid lines of the track on one deck to the grid lines of the master deck, and because of this, it's very important that the grid lines are perfectly lined up. If you're wondering how to line up your grid lines and set up your tracks, I do have a tutorial on that, and I'll link it in the description below. So now let's get started on our first example. The first example that I'm going to use this technique with is when the BPMs are similar and with similar genres. So I'm using my track Dream Guy, which is 140 beats per minute, and then Make It Fat, which is 145 beats per minute. And I'm going to make sure that my tempo range is set at 8% so I can have a little bit more precision with this closer transition. So to do that, I'm going to go to the software, and it doesn't matter which deck you pick. I'm going to go click here, and then under tempo, I'm going to make sure that I have 8% clicked. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the buildup of Dream Guy, which is on this deck, drop into the drop of Make It Fat, which sounds like this. So the regular drop of Dream Guy sounds like this.
TimmyG's my dream guy.
And since they're slightly different BPM, I'm going to use sync to fade them in. So I'm just going to have my tracks at the right point first. So I'm going to have Make It Fat start right here. And then I'm going to have Dream Guy start right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this Make It Fat track up to 140 by moving the slider down just so it's about 140. And then since Dream Guy is the track that's playing, I'm going to sync Dream Guy to Make It Fat. And then when they're synced up and the tracks are loading in, I'm going to pull this fader back. And what it's going to do is it's going to bring both of the tracks back up to 145 just in time for the Make It Fat drop. And while that drop's happening, I'll be playing with the filters a little bit so the bass frequencies don't interfere. And then I'll cut Dream Guy just so we can hear the Make It Fat drop. So here's what that's going to sound like. So now I've synced them up, and I'm pulling the tempo back. And now we can hear that Make It Fat is dropped in and it's back at 145 BPM. The next example that I'm going to do is going to have the BPMs be a little bit farther apart and at slightly different genres. So this time I'm going to keep Dream Guy on the left deck at 140 BPM. And then I'm going to load my track Happy Father's Day, which is 128. And this is a bass house track, so it's a bit different of a genre here. And I'm going to make sure that I move this back to 140. And by the way, if you saw what I just did, if the fader is different on the software, it won't change on the controller until you reach that point on the software. And then once you reach that BPM, then it will change. So anyway, for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Dream Guy. And I'm actually just gonna loop Dream Guy for a little bit. So it'll sound like this. And what we're gonna do is slow down Dream Guy when it's synced up with Happy Father's Day, and then fade that in back to 128 beats per minute. So here's what that's gonna sound like. I'm gonna start Happy Father's Day at the beginning. And then for this one, I'm gonna wanna move the tempo range to 10%, because if it's 8%, it won't reach up to 140. So right about there. So I'm gonna start the Dream Guy loop right now. And I am gonna play with the filters a little bit, just so once again, so the bass frequencies do not interfere. All right, so now I'm gonna play this, and I'm gonna sync up the tracks. And now I'm moving the tempo back to 128 BPM. And that's pretty much it. The last example that I'm going to be doing is an extreme BPM difference. And this one is to be used very sparingly. I wouldn't do this all the time, but this is just kind of showing you what you can do with this transition. So I'm going to load my track White Light, which is 95 BPM, and then Joe the Bro, which is 140 BPM. Make sure that the faders are good. And then what I'm going to be doing is having Joe the Bro go all the way to 95 beats per minute, and then as the tracks are playing together, fade it back into 140 before it drops. So to do that, I'm first going to want to change the tempo range to 50%. And DJay Pro is a bit, I'll say, weird with their sync. If it's closer to like half of the BPM or double the BPM, it might automatically do that. So you have to be very careful with the way that you're bringing the track back. So instead of pulling the Joe the Bro fader to back to just its regular place, what I'm going to be doing is just pulling the White Light fader up to about 140 BPM. Which will be somewhere around here. And then if I want to get it exact, and I can adjust this, like I said, it won't change the tempo until we reach the actual tempo that it's set at. So here's what this one's going to sound like. So I'm going to set this to 95, about 95. It doesn't have to be exact. So like 95.8 is fine. And I'm going to play White Light at the beginning. And just one thing to mention, I do have my key lock on for both tracks. And now I'm going to get ready to play Joe the Bro. And now I'm going to sync them together. And instead of pulling this up, I'm going to pull this one up. And I'm going to use the filter to fade out some of the low frequencies on White Light. Now we're about 140. So I'm going to move this back and see how it's not doing anything until I get there. And if you did notice, like I mentioned, how it gets a bit finicky. When I started moving this, the White Light track cut all the way to 70 BPM from 140. So that's why you don't really need to do what I just did, and that actually might mess it up. So actually, I would suggest just leaving it until it's time to mix the next track. But hopefully this gives you an idea of what you can do by using sync and moving the tempo at the same time. But other than that, that's about it. If you like this video or if it helped you out, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or video suggestions, be sure to leave a comment. If you want to see more content like this and check out my original music, DJ performances, or sound design tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot.